Brett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee. Senate File 166 directs the Department of Public Safety to implement a Real ID compliant driver's license and identification card. I apologize now. I'll sometimes say license when I mean license and ID. I'll sometimes say ID when I mean license and ID, just to conserve on words. But Real ID was passed in 2005 and was one of the primary recommendations coming out of the 9/11 Commission. And it sets minimum identity authentication standards for state IDs to be used for federal purposes, namely boarding aircraft, entering secure federal facilities, and some federal buildings. Following the passage of the federal law, several states initially enacted legislation expressing opposition or barring implementation of federal mandates. Minnesota was one such state. The 2009 legislature enacted a Real ID Prohibition Act for both planning and implementation, and it garnered strong bipartisan support at the time. State responses have changed over time, and today nearly all states in U.S. territory are either in full compliance with federal law or in the process of complying in order to meet the requirements. Now, in 2016, the legislature here in Minnesota lifted the ban, partially lifted the ban, allowing for planning, but not actual implementation or administrative rulemaking. And I think part of the issue that's been confusing for people is that the timeline from the federal government has been changing. Since October 10th of 2015, Real IDs have not been accepted for some federal facilities. They are not accepted for entering secure federal facilities when identification is required by the Department of Homeland Security. And Minnesota does not have an extension, so Minnesota-issued driver's licenses and IDs are not accepted for entry into those buildings or military bases. Now, beginning on January 22nd, 2018, non-compliant licenses and cards will no longer be accepted for boarding commercial aircraft unless an extension has been granted by Homeland Security for that state's identification. So currently, Minnesota's facing, our residents are facing a January 22nd, 2018 deadline. My hope is with the passage of this, we will garner an extension to October of 2020, when the federal government will only accept Real ID compliant licenses and cards for federal purposes. And then from that point on, no additional extensions will be granted. Now, it's true if we don't pass this, other documents will be accepted for federal access, and those include any federally issued identification card, such as a passport, or a Minnesota enhanced driver's license or other enhanced ID. Senate File 161 was based on the bill that passed the Senate last year with bipartisan support and the conference committee drafts. Just at a very high level, I propose to create a two-tier system, a compliant Real ID and a non-compliant driver's license and ID. And we set the minimum requirements for the Real ID to conform with federal law, and we leave the non-compliant ID using current statute and rules, and we keep the enhanced ID. I won't cover every section because it's a lengthy and technical bill, but I'm going to cover those that I think are most relevant. Section 1 covers or defines a non-compliant ID as not meeting the Real ID requirements. Section 2 and 3 define the Real ID as the Real ID Act and temporary lawful status by referencing federal law. Section 4, the department must perform criminal background checks on all agents, current and prospective employees. Section 5 provides the implementation for the federal requirements. It directs the department to issue Real ID compliant licenses and IDs, continue to issue current, non-compliant, and enhanced IDs, that compliance to the Real ID requirements to those requirements in place at enactment. So between the point in time of enactment, if any changes were to come through, those would have to be addressed by the legislature. And then the Commissioner is prohibited from implementing any changes and must notify the Legislature and the Legislative Commission on Data Practices and Personal Data Privacy regarding any federal pending or completed changes. Section 8 establishes that the cost for the Real ID is the same as the non-compliant ID. Section 10 defines the information that must be available to applicants. We want our citizens to understand the differences between the Real ID and the non-compliant ID. So we're directing the department to describe each type of license and ID card, provide an overview of the data shared outside of the state, have a website that have a statement that the Real ID is not mandatory, a website where residents can find additional information, that any renewal card sent out when your driver's license expires or your ID expires, that lists the website, and that applicants for a non-compliant ID must acknowledge that they understand the limitations of the card. Section 11 establishes that the documents that will be required to meet the Real ID requirements. Sections 12 and 13 state that the Real ID must contain a distinguishing mark that shows it is compliant, and non-compliant must state not for federal identification. Section 18 establishes requirements for the use and access of MNLARS and mandates that there be an independent biannual audit with reporting back to the legislature. Section 20 prohibits the department from sharing data on non-compliant driver's licenses and IDs outside of the state if it's not already doing so at the time of enactment. Section 21 prevents the sharing of any firearms data maintained by the department. Section 23 states Department of Vehicle Services must start issuing Real IDs by October 1, 2018, and that the cards be provided at no fee for those with a valid unexpired Minnesota ID until October of 2020. Members, we're going to have a period of time here. Our driver's licenses are good for 4 years. We're going to have folks who are getting their renewals in 2016 and 2017, even early 2018, where they won't have an option of taking a Real ID or not. And we didn't think it was fair to ask them to pay for a non-compliant ID and then have to come back and pay for a Real ID if they so wanted one. Section 24 limits the rulemaking only to those changes necessary to implement the technical aspects of the Real ID. Section 25 is an appropriation to fund the changes. Now that we have a fiscal note, the appropriation should also include funds to offset any shortfalls for the cost of providing the free replacements. Section 27 repeals the existing prohibition on issuing Real IDs, and Section 28 defines the effective date as the date following enactment. Mr. Chair and committee, you know, many Minnesotans expect us to pass a Real ID bill so that they can use their state-issued IDs for federal purposes. Our business community and their employees want to travel without carrying additional credentials. In some cases, our constituents need access to a federal facility. I actually had an email from a mother who was turned away from seeing her son in a military base infirmary because she didn't have the compliant ID. But we also have residents that don't want or need an ID that meets the minimum federal standards, and they're willing to carry additional credentials when needed. And I believe that Senate File 166 is a good compromise to satisfy the needs of both groups. And Mr. Chair, I think we have a number of testifiers, and I'd also be happy to answer any questions.
One moment, Senator Pratt. We're bringing you a copy of the A5 amendment. All of the committee members have it, but apparently you do not.
Oh, the A12 amendment?
I'm sorry, the A12.
I was going to say, I thought I had the A5. So, Mr. Chair, I would just...
One moment, Senator Pratt.
Yep.
Oh, the A12 is now being passed out to the senators.
Mr. Chair, while it's being passed out,
Senator Pratt.
the fiscal note identified a rather large expense for implementing the no-fee replacements. And we know that we have a number of independent registrars that are also performing this work, and they get paid a fee. I just wanted to make sure that the bill and the appropriation accounted for that so that we made those that are actually working on these IDs whole, and they're not taking a financial hit. Those independent businesses aren't taking a financial hit for issuing those free driver's licenses, and that the department has the resources necessary to be able to do it because they are primarily a fee-driven organization.
And I think, Senator Pratt, what we'll do is we'll address the 812, and then maybe we'll go from there to the fiscal note.
Sure.
And explain that to members. And then we'll have taken care of that. Senator Carlson.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Pratt, could you please bring the mic a little bit closer to your mouth? There's people in the audience signaling me that you
Thank
can't
you,
hear
Senator.
Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a question about these amounts that are coming out of vehicle services and driver services funds. Well, kind of fundamental question is this amount, will this amount be available in those funds, A, and B, would this impact any other kinds of services and programs that are funded out of these two funds?
Senator Dibble, are you speaking in reference to the 812?
Yes.
Senator Pratt.
Senator Newman, Senator Dibble, I believe that they will have the funds to be able to do that. And maybe Ms. Boyd can walk through the fiscal note after this. But we had a brief discussion. There are some funds available in the account today. We'll continue to work with Department of Vehicle Services on their fiscal note as this continues through the process. But I thought it was at least fair to really let the registrars and even the department know that we don't want them to be underfunded. We understand the expense associated with the replacement licenses. It's in all honesty the bulk of the fiscal note. The implementation in the original A5 was for $60,000 just simply to do the technical changes, and it's recognizing that there's a large expense by us providing these free replacements.
Ms. Boyd, do you have any information regarding Senator Dibble's question?
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, yes. I have a recent fund balance from Driver and Vehicle Services for the Vehicle Services Operating Account and the Driver Services Operating Account in the Special Revenue Fund. The balance for the Vehicle Services Operating Account is $5.3 million, and for Driver Services Operating Account is $7.1 million. And this is after some cash flow reserves and some other contingency accounts. So this is the end balance after reserves for a total of $12.4 million between the two operating accounts.
Does that help, Senator Dibble?
If I could ask a clarifying question of Ms. Boyd, are these dollars remaining after vehicle services and driver services fund the things that they need to fund from those resources? Because the amount, well, first of all, let me say at the outset, the number that Ms. Boyd just cited doesn't come to the amount that's being appropriated. So that's a problem at the outset. But then wondering if everything else that these funds need to support would be supported should this. I mean, I want to be clear. I support what Senator Pratt is trying to accomplish. I understand that we're maybe not trying to hit the general fund to offset, that we're trying to go within the agency's special revenue funds. I get that. I'm not opposed to this idea, and I know when folks are going to need to renew their licenses inside of the 4-year cycle, so I totally understand and get that, and to the extent that we can not do it out of the general fund, that would be best. I just need to make sure that we have the appropriate resources in these special revenue funds to accomplish this.
Ms. Boyd.
Mr. Chair and Senator, the amounts that I cited, the 12.4 million, were after estimated receipts and less legislative appropriations in that year. So that is a snapshot after other programs have been paid for. Certainly officials from the department can clarify that statement for me. And regarding the amendment, the first, if you see on line 1.5 of the amendment, paragraph B is a transfer, a one-time transfer from the balance of, most of the balance of the vehicle services operating account to the driver services operating account, and then an appropriation of 12 million is made from driver services operating account. So these are not additive paragraphs, just to clarify.
Do you have another question, Senator Dibble?
Well, Mr. Chair, I would appreciate hearing from the agency what the, we're going to draw down the account to near zero. And I'm just wondering if the agency has any perspective on that, on doing
Anyone
that.
here from the agency that can shed some light on this issue?
And Mr. Chair, I just need to say for the record, had the BCA not rated these funds a number of years ago for totally unrelated purposes, we might have enough money to work with.
Thank you, Senator Dibble, for that observation. Before we hear from the agency, Senator Dibble has raised some questions, but before we go there, perhaps Senator Pratt, you just want to tell us a little bit about your A12 amendment, and then we'll go to the agency.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. The A12 amendment, I thought Ms. Boyd did a good job of kind of explaining it, but really transferring $5 million in fiscal year from the driver vehicle services operating account to the driver services operating account, and then drawing that down $12 million in order to fund the implementation and conformity of Real ID, and that $3 million be used to reimburse the agents that I mentioned, who a large number of our driver's licenses are actually managed through independent license bureaus, and those small businesses get a fee for processing the application and the license, and we want to make sure that those local people are made whole.
Okay, we have at the testifying table representative from the department. If you would identify yourself and try and answer Senator Dibble's concerns.
For the record, my name is Dawn Olson. I'm the Director of Driver and Vehicle Services at the Department of Public Safety. The reserves that you see in front of you are our calculation of what we do on an annual basis of the funds that we take in based on the transaction work that we do. Somewhat the challenge is the working capital account that shows up is a $5 million account that we need to have in place in order to pay our bills at the start of the fiscal year. So that would probably be one area that we might have some concerns of if we're looking to move that appropriation out. That's an important piece of our overall business operation. The other accounts are contingency funds that we keep money set aside in case of a disaster or something that could happen to one of our offices. It eliminates the need for the legislature to have to find funding to help us recover from those disasters. And so we keep money in that contingency so we could come forward and ask just for spending authority to be able to appropriate those funds in those certain situations. While there's probably some workable solution in the equation that's there, we would just want to have some discussion as to what the potential could be before going forward.
Senator Dibble, anything further?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So what I heard, if I can interpret, is this would make things tight and uncomfortable for driver and vehicle services, but maybe we could figure out some mechanisms, like, for example, the working capital account. Maybe we could create some sort of a ability to identify some general fund dollars just for cash flow purposes, or, it sounds like there might be some sort of, the creative finance people. So we probably don't have time to solve these technical problems today, so I would support this amendment at this time. But moving forward to the next committee and/or full finance, maybe we can understand with a little more clarity the implications and what the solutions might be.
Very good. And Senator Pratt, as we move forward, when this hits full finance, maybe you're going to want to address that issue a little bit more. We've got Senator Kiffmeyer to the A12 amendment.
Yes, Chairman. I do, and Senator Pratt, I have an amendment mainly addressing this financial issue, basically saying, and Ms. Stengel has written the language for me.
Senator Kiffmeyer, are you offering an oral amendment to the A12 amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Proceed.
On line 1.13, after 23 period, any amount of this appropriation unspent at the end of fiscal year 2019 cancel back to the original account.
Read that once more, please, Senator Kiffmeyer. Nice and slow so people can write it down.
All right, so we're talking, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair,
Senator
Senator Kiffmeyer. So we're talking line 1.13, page 22, line 15, before the first 30,000, insert A. Is that where we're making the?
My amendment is over with council.
Senator Kiffmeyer.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, yes.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Take another shot at your oral amendment.
All right, I'll go back. Any amount of this appropriation.
Line numbers, Senator.
1.13 on the, line .13 on the
1.13, sorry.
A12 amendment, after 23 period, would read, any amount of this appropriation unspent at the end of fiscal year 2019 cancel back to the original account.
So we're looking at June. But I think that's just.
Mr. Chair, I just had a chance to discuss it with Ms. Olson, and we would take that as a friendly amendment.
Thank you, Mr.
Senator Pratt, one more time.
I just had a quick conversation with Ms. Olson, and we would take that as a friendly amendment.
Wonder if we can we incorporate that into the A12?
Or just vote on it.
Ms. Stengel? Okay, we're just going to incorporate that language into the A12 amendment,
Yes, sir.
as long as it's a friendly amendment. Any further questions or comments on the A12 amendment? Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Relative to the Kiffmeyer amendment and the bigger question, just a question for Ms. Olson. Assuming that these are important reserves, what would be an estimate on how long it would take to build them back if the full amount ended up being appropriated?
Senator Pratt.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, it would take a few years generally for us to build back up that reserve. Like I said, my major concern is to make sure that we have working capital to pay our bills on the first of the fiscal year. Like I said, generally we do have a reserve. We carry a reserve. This legislature has done things with that reserve in the past, but I would imagine it would take 2 to 3 years to build that back up.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, one moment. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Senator Kent. As I talked with Ms. Olson and Ms. Boyd, we have tried to take into account the cash flow needs of the department before transferring these funds. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Olson, I'm gathering that you have been, because of this Real ID coming to the United States, all the states involved, that you have been looking at the driver vehicle and how license and things are going to be working and stuff. Have you, as an agency, requested any funds from the federal government to help in implementing this type of a ID?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, nothing comes to mind in the short term. We did apply for a grant back in 2008 when it was still technically legal for us to apply for money to help to move us in that direction. That was about a $700,000 grant we received at that time. And we used that to help us reinforce our technical system around Social Security validation and to move us in the enhanced driver's license arena to be able to provide that credential. But I haven't seen anything, I haven't seen anything recently, I've heard of anything.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, that's a concerning thing for me that, you know, the federal government's going to be involved with this, and once we hand over we put into place our Real ID here in Minnesota, the federal government will be in charge of that. And I'm just wondering, because you've already put in for one grant, I would think there would be more grants that would be available for this. And it's a concerning thing for me that we're going to hand this all over to the federal government, and then we'll be underneath their auspices rather than ours, even though we have in this particular amendment and amendments the ability to have a non-compliant Real ID card or a license plate card. But because it falls into the federal government's jurisdiction, I find that once they have control, they can change the rules. And so I'm just concerned about that, and I guess I'm wondering, that's why I was asking the question, how much money has come in from the federal government? And you say you've gotten one grant already, but no other grants have come to your mind at this time. Thank you.
Ms. Olson, have you got a response?
Yeah, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, not anything of recent. I don't know of anything that's come in or available.
Senator Jensen. I have you down, Senator Jensen, for a question, and you are giving me a questioning look. Do you have a question, Senator Jensen? You did, and now you can't remember.
I was simply, excuse me, Mr. Chair, I was simply asking the question about the fiscal note, and I was just curious in regards to the fact that in 2019, it looks like a $9 million expenditure and then almost $14 million in 2021.
Maybe, Senator Jensen, you could hold
on to that.
Your question. At this point, there's been a request to walk through the fiscal note before we vote on the 812 amendment. I think that's fine, and I
Thank you,
will
Mr.
have
Chair.
it explained, and if you've got questions after that, then we can go ahead. Are there any other questions on the 812 amendment? Senator Little.
Thank you, Chair. I just had one comment on the friendly amendment to the 812. You know, the language reads original accounts. We have 3 different accounts in this section, so we may just want to define what account exactly it goes back to, because it could go to the commissioner, or it could go to a special revenue, or it could go to driver services. So we just may want to name it.
Ms. Boyd, can you respond to which accounts? Ms. Stengel, I guess.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Little. I appreciate your point. I think that maybe this language will have to be clarified a little bit as we move on. There are several different accounts that are going into in different proportion, so I think we'll have to maybe do a little bit more work on this and come back and add the specific accounts in the proportions. I don't think that's something we can get done today, but this gives the intent of what Senator Kiffmeyer wants, and we can come back and plug in the rest of those details.
Senator Little.
Thank you, Chair. And this is a question for Senator Pratt and team, I suppose. In regards to the $3 million appropriated to the agents that are doing these IDs and licenses, can you talk about that math and where you come up with that? Because I was reading in the fiscal note that about 74% of IDs are done by the agents. So I'm wondering if that is a large enough appropriation.
Mr. Chair,
Senator
Senator
Pratt.
Little, one moment, please.
Ms. Olson?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, we did take into account the full amount, the $8 filing fee that would need to go back to the driver's license agents to cover their cost of doing the interaction with the customer. So about 76% of the total number that could potentially come in, or 74%, I believe, is how we calculate that number and then multiplied it times 8.
Senator Little, I think Ms. Boyd also has some information on your question. Ms. Boyd?
Mr. Chair and Senator Little, the 3 million number was derived from the fiscal note on the last page under local fiscal impact. It talks about the loss of revenue to the driver's license agents for the loss of the filing fee, and that's over a period of 3 fiscal years. That's $7.6 million. Earlier in the fiscal note, in the assumptions, the fiscal note estimates that 40% of that will happen in fiscal year 19, and these appropriations and transfers are meant to cover only fiscal year 19, so that's where the 3 million comes from. It's 40% of that revenue loss.
Maybe it'd be a good idea at this point for Ms. Boyd to just walk us through the fiscal note, because we are now getting into it anyhow. So Ms. Boyd, would you walk us through the fiscal note, please?
Mr. Chair, of course. Mr. Chair and committee, I'm not going to walk through every line of the fiscal note because I don't think you want that. I'll try to hit on some of the important bullet points, and I would invite the agency to correct me or clarify if necessary. Starting at the bottom of page 2 of the, well, maybe I should look at the first page, actually, I'm sorry, to look at the numbers. You'll see on the first page of the fiscal note, the estimates are that there will be general fund net costs of $18,000 in fiscal year 2018. And from special revenue, net costs of $9.1 million in fiscal year 19, $8.5 million in fiscal year 20, and $5.2 in fiscal year 2021. Again, I want to reiterate that the amendment under discussion is just covering costs for fiscal year 19. So if you turn to page 2 of the fiscal note, you'll see at the top that these numbers are split out by expenditures and revenues. There is special revenue expenditures listed in the fiscal note from the department for all 3 years, and revenue loss as well for the fee exemptions. And then I'm just going to skip to page 3. There's a long list of assumptions that underlie the calculations made in the fiscal note. There's no line numbers, so this might be a little difficult, but I'm just going to point out a few. Well, I'll run through as quickly as I can, that some assumptions made on the requirements of the department are that there's going to be a biennial audit of DVS info systems, and that will have a cost. There's also a subsequent report for these biennial audits. About 8 points down, there's a line that says, assumes approximately 2 million people will be eligible for no-fee cards, of which about 1.28 people will apply. So that's where a lot of the calculations come from. This 1.28 people who are assumed to apply and be eligible for a fee exemption are split 40% assumed in fiscal year 19 to be processed, 40% in fiscal year 20, and 20% in fiscal year 2021. And then it breaks down these customers to the department by what class of license or ID card they hold. A few lines down from that, it says assumes, as Ms. Olson stated, assumes approximately 74% of all card transactions are completed at a driver's license agent and the remaining at DVS offices. Then there are some assumptions about mailing costs related to the new requirements, first stating that the current renewal notice is a small postcard with a certain amount of postage, and that renewal information will be greater under the Real ID requirements, and that a letter or larger postcard will be necessary, resulting in an increased postage cost. There will be a one-time mailing cost of $940,000 to notify the 2 million individuals that are eligible for a no-fee card. And that is a one-time cost, I'm assuming, in fiscal year 19. And then there are some other mailing costs. There will be public notification materials produced, and that will have an annual cost of $25,000. Let's skip down. A couple lines down, there are a number of assumptions about required staff under the new requirements. And I believe, I think there's about 16 new staff members listed here at different levels of specialist or senior or supervisor. And the next couple lines below that estimates all the new equipment, computers, software, et cetera, required for the additional staff. Oh, it says 29 additional staff. I'm sorry, I must have counted wrong. Let's see. On the next page, at the top of the page, it assumes some about background checks. That's covered later in the BCA section of the fiscal note. And it assumes a number of programming hours to develop some functions related to renewal processes for the cards. Then there's a section, that was all to do with driver and vehicle services under the department. Next is for the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, who are responsible for conducting background checks under the requirements of the Real ID Act. It says here, DVS estimates there'll be 1,200 individuals who'll be subject to the new background check, and I believe those are both DLAs and DVS employees. And Ms. Olson is nodding that that's correct. And there is a $32 charge for those background checks that the state will pay for. Under BCA, there's also a couple sections having to do with computer programming, and that's about data dissemination and prohibitions listed in the Real ID Act. One is about prohibiting dissemination of data about non-compliant licenses and IDs, and there will be some programming necessary to ensure that, and then more programming necessary to shut down the permit tracking system operated pursuant, I won't read all that. This is about disseminating information on firearms and permit holders related to that. So then near the bottom of page 4, we get into calculations. The biggest impact of the fiscal note is going to be the loss of fee revenue for the fee-exempt cards. And you'll see those calculations, the first big chunk under DVS, and it calculates them according to different classes of ID and renewal cards, or I'm sorry, ID and license cards. The total there is going to be $13.26 million over the renewal period, but again, 40% of that is attributable to fiscal year 19, so that's about $5.3 million in lost revenue. And then there are ongoing costs related to various things. The first two are related to mailing renewal notices and also producing public notification materials we discussed. Next is $100,000 biennially for the data security audit required in the bill, and that starts in 2020. The next several lines on that page are all staff costs related to the staff I mentioned earlier required or assumed by the department as the requirements of the bill. If you total those up, that will be an annual staff-only cost of about $770,000 annually, and that starts in fiscal year 19. If you turn to the top of page 5, there's listed some one-time costs under the bill. The first 2 or 3 are staff and equipment costs related to the new staff members and requirements of the new system. Excuse me. Excuse me. Sorry about that, Mr. Chair. Then there is postage related to notifying eligible fee exemptions. I'm so sorry to keep coughing in the microphone. Then there are the programming costs, and those are DVS programming costs and not BCA, a one-time cost. And then there is the actual cost of producing and mailing the no-fee cards, and that is $2.5 million over the renewal period, the 2-year period, and that is 40% of that is about $1 million. I apologize. I'm going to wrap this up because I'm going to keep coughing, Mr. Chair. Under BCA, there are costs related to background checks and programming that I went over earlier. You can see the amounts there. And the other thing I want to point out is under local fiscal impact, as I noted to Senator Little earlier, there is DLA agents will also have to cover the cost of background investigations of their staff, and the filing fee of $8 loss for the no-fee cards.
Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and perhaps Ms. Olson can answer. This is a follow-up to Senator Little's question, which is relevant to the fiscal note. So in the A12 amendment on 1.12, the $3 million to reimburse the agents, is there a reimbursement process so that we know what the costs are that are being reimbursed?
Ms. Olson.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, nothing that I could speak to today. I think we will want to give that some thought and consideration as to how we would make that reimbursement, just to make sure that the deputies or the DL agents would have their cash flow as well. So I think it would certainly be something we'd have a conversation with them about.
And just as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, I would just make sure that we feel comfortable that we have good controls over what we're being asked to reimburse.
Yep.
Senator Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for either Senator Pratt or Ms. Boyd. When I look through the fiscal note and I see the $9 million for 2019 biennium and the $14 million, a couple of questions. One is, do we think those costs will be ongoing then and all the biennium going forward in terms of an allocation for this? And then the second question I would have is, are these costs higher than they would have been had we acted sooner? Or in fact, would there have been a savings because we didn't act sooner, and from 2009 to 2016, we chose to not participate until this time? I'm just trying to get a little bit of a historical appreciation as to how the dollars shook out, because obviously some states acted before we did, and here we are. And I was just curious how that played out.
Ms. Boyd, do you have Senator Jensen's questions in mind?
Mr. Chair, I believe I do. However, I believe the department might, if it's relating to how these costs may have changed over time, I believe the department might be better suited to answer.
Ms. Olson?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I think this is always going to be an issue with the timing on Real ID and people that are not eligible to get one yet. They don't renew for a period of time. I don't believe it would have made any difference last year if we had passed that bill, if the cost would be different. It would have been a matter of how we would fund those costs. But from our perspective, we see this as very short term. It would be for a 2-year period of time to get us to 21, where then everybody, when they came in for a renewal, would have that option. You can either get a Real ID compliant card or a non-compliant card. But we're kind of in the middle of a renewal cycle here for some of our citizens.
Senator Jensen.
Mr. Chair, thank you. Follow-up question. Are there any federal dollars at all coming to help us with these expenses, or is it more or less, if you will, a federal mandate with no dollars associated with it?
Ms. Olson.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, there are no federal dollars at this point that I know of to come with this.
Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just looking in the assumptions that were here, and I was hoping to follow up on what Ms. Olson had to say about the grant that was requested by the federal government and given to us. And I was looking for somewhere in the assumptions that that money was put in either into the special revenue fund or into a fund called Real ID or something to designate how much that money was given. And I thought, Ms. Boyd, you would maybe have an idea of where that money would be that Ms. Olson just said we had received back in 08, 09, or whenever. And so I was just looking for it. If it was in the special revenue fund, I would think that we would be keeping that money for when we did implement this Real ID. So if you have any comments on that or some information regarding that grant that was received by the state.
Ms. Boyd.
Mr. Chair and Senator, I can find you better information. We don't have it. It is not mentioned. I'm sorry. It is not mentioned in the fiscal note. It is not kept separate in any of the operating funds. It is not I have not seen tracking on the grant. I believe it was in 2008, and I can find you better information on it and what it was used for. Maybe the department can help with that as well.
Well, Ms. Boyd, maybe Ms.
Senator
Olson can give me some comfort language to say there was a special Real ID fund, like we name it a special miscellaneous revenue fund. Is there something that has that kind of a heading in it? You've tucked it away underneath there to say, this money is granted from this, when and if we do, this is a grant that we are going to be using in future.
Ms. Olson?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, when we did apply for that grant, it was in 2008, so those funds no longer exist. Those funds were used. When we had the prohibition on going forward with Real ID, we did present an option to the Department of Homeland Security, asking us if we could use the funds for enhanced driver's license to be able to get that program set up and operational. We were granted that permission, and I have all the documentation on the grant, how it was used, and the permissions that went along with it. But anytime we would get grant funds, that's how it would be classified, is as a grant and not special revenue, because that's very specific to what we take in for our transactions.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Anderson?
Excuse me, Ms. Olson. So the money was, the request was for, in case we did go Real ID, but since we had a prohibition, you had that money available. And because we were looking at enhanced, they gave you a waiver of sorts to do that. So, okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee,
Ms.
that's
Olson.
correct. That's correct.
Senator Dibble?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And appreciate the opportunity to hear the fiscal notes before we vote on the A12. So I'm just a couple of clarifying questions. So what I heard in the presentation was that to both offset the fee for those who would need to renew prior to the typical 4-year renewal cycle, and to reimburse agents for their lost fee revenue. That's a grand total of $13.26 million. And then I also heard about 770 ongoing costs to driver services, some additional costs, and I didn't capture the number, one time, as well, to not related to the fee revenue for driver services. So my question is, the A12 seems to fall a little short of what's needed. It also appropriates just in 2019. So there seem to be tails that we're not considering or accounting for today. And so, A, is that correct? And maybe Ms. Boyd can give me the answer to that. And B, if that is the case, then what is our plan to deal with the next biennium and the tails?
Ms. Boyd, to the first question.
Mr. Chair and Senator Dibble, that is correct. The A12 amendment only deals with fiscal year 19 costs and using existing resources in the special revenue accounts. So
Okay.
20 and 21 are not appropriated in the amendment.
All right. So I guess my question is to Senator Pratt, what's our plan for tails?
Senator Pratt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dibble, the plan is to incorporate that into the transportation finance bill and fund the department for those expenses in those fiscal years.
Mr. Chair.
Senator-
Senator Pratt, do we know from what source? From general fund or?
Mr.
Pratt.
Chair, Senator Dibble, that hasn't been identified yet.
Okay. All right.
And it's my assumption that it would be part of the work of the committee to figure out the most appropriate place to allocate those funds from.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair,
Senator-
so we'll deal with the tails issues yet this year.
Senator Pratt?
I think that was a question to you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I think it was, too. The answer to your question is, Senator Dibble, yes, and I would welcome your input in resolving that issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Senator Osborne?
Mr. Chair, is there a motion on the A12 at this point? As amended?
Well, At this point, I have no further testimony or request for questions. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to comment on the 812 amendment with the incorporated change? Seeing none. All those in favor of the 812 amendment as with the incorporated language by Senator Kiffmeyer, please signify by voting yes.
Yes.
All those opposed,
No.
same sign. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted. I thought we were going to lose that amendment there for a second. Senator Pratt, the 812 amendment is now adopted.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That concludes my testimony, and I believe you've got quite a list. It's also come to my attention that there's a testifier from the BCA that would like to address one issue in the bill. And is Ms. Weeks here?
Before we go forward, it has been pointed out to me that nobody actually moved the 812 amendment, so we're going to back up and redo it. And for that, I apologize. Is there a motion to approve the 812 amendment? No. Senator Kent, so moves. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the 812 amendment signify by saying aye.
As amended.
Those opposed?
No.
The amendment is adopted.
As amended. Right.
As amended.
Yeah.
Actually, that was an incorporated,
Okay.
an
Great.
incorporation
Thanks.
rather than an amendment, so. And it is the language previously indicated by Senator Kiffmeyer.
All right.
So-
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So before we start getting into advocates and opponents of the bill, I'd just like to offer Ms. Engler a chance to talk about one specific provision.
Be happy to. Please state your name and the agency that you are representing, and please proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members. My name is Katie Engler. I'm with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, which is part of the Department of Public Safety. And I'm here specifically to talk about the language in Section 21, which begins on line 19.16 on page 19 of the A5 amendment that you previously adopted. And specifically, this is language about firearms. And just wanted to make you aware that the Bureau, on behalf of the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety, operates what's known as the permit tracking system, which is specific to permits to carry, and it is used by sheriffs to track and process applications for those permits, as well as we have a database that holds information about permits to carry that were denied. The language as it appears in the language in the A5 amendment would mean that a law enforcement officer who is interacting with an individual would have no ability to query to find out if the person they were interacting with held a permit to carry or not, which is something that they can do today. In addition, language in the permit to carry statute directs prosecutors to notify sheriffs if an individual with a valid permit to carry is subject to a criminal offense or a criminal charge, that if that person was convicted would disqualify them from having a permit. That would also be prohibited by the language. And finally, we recently developed, at the request of the sheriffs, a system that interacts with the permit tracking system that helps sheriffs more efficiently process the background checks that are required before a permit to carry is issued. And we would have to, based on the language in the amendment, make that no longer available to sheriffs because the commissioner is prohibited from sharing that information. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This was a note that I got I first saw it yesterday. I can't tell you when it was sent. It was sent yesterday. And we took this language from what we had in the conference committee report that wasn't passed last year. And it was my understanding that, unknown to me, that there were some concerns raised at that point in time. So I would commit that prior to a stop in judiciary that we work with the BCA to make sure that the language meets the public safety's needs.
Senator Pratt, I would indicate that, while this committee has overall jurisdiction of the bill, judiciary has specific jurisdiction over this issue in Section 21, and I would expect that it is something that you will be faced when you go to Senator Limmer's committee. Senator Dibble.
Mr. Chair, so I don't know what the ultimate outcome of this, this discussion and debate and various amendments are going to be, but I'm very concerned about what I just heard from the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. There's clearly a pretty dramatic reduction in safety for our community and for our licensed peace officers as they're trying to conduct, their duties to keep us safe. I wouldn't want to vote for this proposal with Section 21 in it at this point. So, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move to strike Section 21.
Senator Pratt.
Mr. Chair, again, I think the idea is to make sure that, to reinforce the fact that we have data privacy on both personal information as well as Second Amendment rights. And it's not my intent to in any way reduce the current ability of our law enforcement officials. This was really meant more for communication outside of the state. And again, while maybe not worded in the best way, I think this is I would suggest that we move this forward and address it in judiciary where they have primary jurisdiction over this particular item as you so stated, and give me time to work with the department.
Senator Dibble, you've raised an interesting question. I will tell you that Ms. Stengel is currently working on some possible language. Senator Pratt has indicated what he's really trying to target is government entities out of the state of Minnesota. And I wonder if you would consider withdrawing your amendment at this point and give Ms. Stengel a little bit more time to work on it. We'll come back to it.
I'll withdraw my amendment.
Thank you, Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd open up. Then that concludes my testimony, and I would open it up to public opinion or public comment if you're so inclined.
Yeah. At this point, members, I see I've got Senator Kent on the list, but I would like to go to the public testimony if
Mr. Chair, my question had to do with that issue, and I wanted to make sure and sort of ask what the process is going to be to make sure that we have plenty of time to hear people who've come in from around the state to talk about this issue.
Yeah, and Senator Pratt, members, sort of the game plan at this point is I've got a fairly long list of testifiers that want to come in and testify, both pro and con. We are going to go to that at this point. Yes. And on the basis of the list that I have, I'm going to ask that the testifiers be respectful of the committee time. I want to hear from everyone, but I'm going to ask that you limit your testimony to 4 minutes, 5 minutes, absolute maximum, or we will be here all day.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have we dealt with the motion that's on the table?
It has been withdrawn.
It was. Okay. Thank you.
So what we'll do is we'll go to the public testimony at this point, and I will indicate, members, that we can be in this room until 1:45. And after the public testimony, then it would be my intention to come back to the members and allow members to ask any questions that they have on the bill in general. So at this point, I would invite folks to come forward that are on the list. Ms. Olson has already been at the testifying table. I don't know if she has anything further. She is shaking her head and says no. From there, we would go to the folks who are testifying in favor, and that would be Bentley Graves, Mitch Killian, and Dave Johnson. If you would come forward, please. Mr. Graves, we can start with you because you're at the table.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Bentley Graves. I'm the Director of Healthcare and Transportation Policy at the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. And just for some level setting, the Chamber is a statewide business organization. It's the state's largest business organization. We have 2,300 members from around the state, all corners of the state, all industries of business, all sizes of business. We spent a lot of time and effort and energy last session trying to encourage quick action to bring Minnesota in compliance with the federal Real ID law. We, like many, were disappointed that that did not happen. But we're very appreciative of Senator Pratt for bringing this legislation forward so quickly and teeing this up as a priority for the 2017 session. We have a number of members who require their employees to have access to efficient air travel. And as you heard, in just about a year, if Minnesota does not become compliant with the federal Real ID standards, then Minnesotans will not be able to use their driver's license to board federally regulated commercial air travel. And that presents a significant problem for a number of our members. And while that is indeed a very significant concern for about 12 months from now, many of our other members also require their employees to have regular access to federal buildings and federal facilities, secure sites of various kinds. And already, access to those sites with a Minnesota driver's license is prohibited. So this is an issue that is already affecting Minnesota commerce, obviously has the it may have an even greater impact in the coming months. So we very much appreciate this body considering this today, Senator Pratt, for bringing this forward. We look forward to working with all of you to bring Minnesota in conformity with Real ID and to ensure that commerce isn't impeded by this. So thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Graves. And I did want to indicate to folks that in terms of your public testimony, please address your comments to the A5 delete all amendment. We will not be discussing any bill today that has been entertained in the other body. Mr. Killian.
Chairman Newman, members of the committee, my name is Mitch Killian. I'm the Director of Governmental Affairs with the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and thanks for the chance to comment. And thank you to Senator Pratt for bringing this issue forward early in the session. As you can imagine, we'd like to see quick resolution to this issue. We've been dealing with it since 2005, and it's been hanging over our heads. Some of you are hearing about the possibilities of what could happen come January of next year, but I want to just tell you about a couple of things that are happening right now. The Airports Commission is tasked with promoting air service in the area, and we are continuously out trying to get new carriers or existing carriers to expand service. As we're out there, the carriers look at lots of different issues, and this is one of them. If we're out recruiting JetBlue, who's probably 6 to 9 months out from putting equipment in our airport, that if we are working with somebody, it's usually 6 to 9 months out, and you have this issue hanging out over us, would you be a company that would be willing to invest and put a new airliner into our airport come January with this hanging out over our head? So it's a factor that gets factored into our airliner recruitment, and it's affecting us already today. The second piece that I would mention to you is about 50% of our air traffic travelers at MSP are leisure travelers, and they're folks that don't quite understand. They're not your business travelers that are traveling all the time. Our largest sector of growth is over in the Terminal 2 Humphrey, Spirit, Sun Country, airlines like that. And what you're seeing is passengers that aren't like necessarily getting pulled away from Delta and our existing carriers, but it's new traffic. It's people that are choosing to fly that haven't flown before because of those ultra low-cost carriers that we're seeing. And this type of confusion actually scares them away from air traffic. Between the TSA wait lines and parking and those challenges that they have already, you throw this into the mix and them not sure if they have the right ID, we are convinced that we're already seeing passengers that are choosing not to use air travel because of challenges that are out there, and this adds to that. You really, on a daily basis, we're receiving questions about what do I need and things, and if you haven't seen the signs at the airport that say you must have the ID coming, it's confusing people a lot. And so we naturally would like to see a quick resolution to the issue. And then finally, you probably are hearing about the possibility of the federal government repealing this. Since 2005, there's been bills introduced. There's one bill out there right now that actually talks about repealing it. But we're pretty confident the deadline is the deadline. They haven't heard the bills. There's not movement on them. There doesn't seem to be any action. So the idea of taking the risk because there's a bill introduced and that the federal government's going to repeal it, we've been at this since 2005. They haven't repealed it. We're down to 10 months. We really hope that we can resolve this issue and not wait till the end of session or late in the, maybe even a special session. The sooner we can do this, the better for the airport. Thanks.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Johnson. And while Mr. Johnson is speaking, perhaps Ms. Mickelson could come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Dave Johnson. I'm a partner at the law firm of Faegre Baker Daniels, and I represent Delta Airlines. Originally, Mr. Davidman, who is the Vice President of State and Local Government Affairs, was intending to testify, but he was unexpectedly needed to be pulled away. But he does have a letter that I'd like to distribute to the committee if possible.
We'll have a page, pick it up and distribute it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Please continue.
Thank you. Delta Airlines supports finding a solution to the Real ID issue that's consistent with Senate File 166 that will allow Minnesotans to continue flying. Delta Airlines operates more than 400 flights a day through MSP to over 150 nonstop destinations. Last year, over 25 million individuals utilized Delta Airlines and flew through MSP, and it's the second largest hub in the Delta network. Ensuring that our customers have a positive and seamless travel experience is a top priority for Delta, and we're concerned that if Minnesota does not come into compliance with the Real ID Act by the DHS's January 22nd, 2018 deadline, that Delta customers will arrive at MSP prepared to use a Minnesota driver's license to board an aircraft and find that they can no longer travel with that documentation. This could lead to and will lead to confusion and frustration for our customers, so we're hopeful that we can find a solution that will allow Minnesotans to continue flying, and thank you for allowing us the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Ms. Mickelson.
My name, my name is Gloria Stock Mickelson, and thank you, Mr. Chair and the committee, for this opportunity. It states that I work for Travel Leaders, which is correct. It's a Plymouth, Minnesota-based travel company. But more importantly, today, I'm representing the American Society of Travel Agents, in particular, our Minnesota members. We have 319 retail travel agencies in the state of Minnesota, and over 800 independent contractors. We're all selling travel, business and leisure, to Minnesota people. Our travel agencies have a very vested interest in this issue. We're already coaching our customers about what to do in January 2018. We know that as of right now, they must have a U.S. passport, a U.S. passport card, a DHS Trusted Traveler Card, similar to, or what is Global Entry for people who are aware of that program, a U.S. military ID, permanent resident card, or a tribal-issued photo ID accepted by the federal government. We're getting hit with questions day in and day out. We've got colleges that with their teams and their groups trying to plan for spring of 18, and they don't know. Some of their people are Minnesota citizens, some are not. Who needs a passport, who doesn't? We have a family that just was sent to me yesterday, extended family trying to plan a Disney vacation for June of 18. Grandma and Grandpa want to take the whole extended family there. Only 2 of them carry U.S. passports. Do they book now? Do they just hang out and wait to see if they should or should not? Those are hitting us day in and day out right now. People are afraid to book for 18 because they're just not sure. I mean, as smart travel professionals, we're coaching our people day in and day out about this, but we really encourage you on behalf of the Minnesota travel agencies to take action on Real ID. It will make our lives a whole lot easier and make our Minnesota citizens able to travel next year.
Thank you, Ms. Mickelson. Then that is the folks who wanted to come in and testify in favor of the bill, so we will now go to those who wish to testify against it. And I have Twyla Braze, Ben Feist, John Keller. If they would come to the table, please.
Mr. Chair, my name is Matt Flanders, and I'll be testifying on behalf of Twyla Braze today.
Please proceed.
If I can have a page, please distribute some packets here while I go into my testimony. So again, my name is Matt Flanders, and I'm the legislative specialist with Citizens Council for Health Freedom. We view this as a constitutional issue, one of states' rights versus federal commandeering of a state function, where the state of Minnesota would be putting the federal law into our own state law. Now, we want to acknowledge that you can still fly without a real ID. The TSA acknowledges that there are alternate documents, and that has been said. The Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security can also unilaterally add to or expand the definition of official purposes at any time without congressional oversight. And you'll see that in your packet. These new official purposes could include health care, access to firearms and ammunition, even driving. The law requires sharing of all information contained in the state motor vehicle database through a central hub that indexes key information from every holder of a driver's license or ID card. Again, that is in your handout. There's also a new rule that requires states to recertify every 3 years. Now, you'd only require recertification if you intend to make changes. So this two-tier license that's been said to provide a sense of security or safety for privacy-concerned citizens, we don't believe this is actually true security, because this information still has to be shared according to the federal law. So the so-called option of a non-compliant license can also be increasingly limited as the federal government increases the scope of the for federal purposes license. Your packet also includes a list of the data points that will be shared with the federal hub, including the social security number. I'd also like to address the claim that all the states are either compliant or moving towards compliance. I spoke with Senator Daines' office from Montana on Friday, and their state is not moving towards compliance, according to his office. He also informed me of a number of other states that are not moving towards compliance. I believe he spoke of Maine. And in your packet, the green piece, that's a letter from 116 legislators from Pennsylvania, which is one of the 25 states yet to conform to Real ID. They just sent this letter to President Trump, laying out the 4 reasons they object to Real ID, including the insertion of federal government into the power reserved for the states. And like was mentioned before, there is a bipartisan Real ID bill, repeal bill at the federal level, that's signed by Senator Daines, Senator Jon Tester, and Senator Rand Paul. I'd also like to address the questions about the Real ID grants. If I can direct you to the third part of your packet, the one with a map on the front. The Minnesota Department of Public Safety applied for, received, and spent federal Real ID grant money while the state was and still is under a law prohibiting Real ID. A member of the Minnesota House asked DPS to provide all the information on spending of Real ID grants. This is what the department disclosed, and this is what we have. In 2008, the department applied for and received $694,000. They used it for the Social Security number, and they later repurposed it in 2012 for the EDL. In 2009, they received $833,717. Not sure what that was used for, But in case there's any question about whether or not this was a Real ID grant, the application kit mentioned Real ID 27 times. In 2009, in May, the governor signed the Real ID prohibition. And then in 2011, DPS received a grant for $829,473. They later spent $829,411 for the facial recognition project. This is all laid out in your packet. Now, in 2012 and beyond, Homeland Security switched to a...
Mr. Flanders, you're going to have to wrap up.
Okay.
You are now at about 5 minutes.
Okay. In 2012, Homeland Security changed their grant program to a block grant, but from 2012 through 2016, the driver's license security grant program could be used for those purposes. So we have questions about what was done with that money. And bottom line, we don't believe that, that Minnesota should be complying with Real ID. DHS can threaten and coerce. That's why, there's been 5 enforcement deadlines that have come to pass.
If I allow you to significantly go by the deadline, I will have to let everyone go by the deadline. We do have your packet in mind, and we have it, so I would ask you to please wrap up.
Okay, thank you, sir. Then I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Flanders. Mr. Feist.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Ben Feist. I'm the Legislative Director for the ACLU of Minnesota. I'll be brief today, especially since you should have a copy of written testimony in your packets as well from me. To be clear, the ACLU opposed compliance with the Federal Real ID Act in 2009 when Minnesota joined the majority of states in rejecting compliance. We do continue to believe that the Real ID Act itself is bad law that shouldn't have been passed in 2005 and should be repealed or significantly modified by the U.S. Congress. We do understand at the same time that the state is in a tricky position here. Our primary concern with Real ID has always been its potential function as an internal passport or national ID card that could increasingly be used to track and control individuals' movements and activities. As has been alluded to, the Federal Act still includes a few troubling requirements, including presentation and verification of source documents and the construction of a 50-state interlinked database that make all the information in a person's file available to other states and the federal government. Under the implementing regulations issued by DHS, neither of these provisions are currently in force, and we believe that the vocal resistance to the Act in Minnesota and elsewhere since 2005 was critical to stopping implementation thus far. However, this troubling language has not been repealed. The incoming DHS secretary or future administration could easily decide to initiate efforts to enforce all the aspects of this law, including those that are troubling to privacy advocates. We also remain concerned that implementation of the documentation requirements may have a disparate impact on a number of communities, including the poor, elderly, and minorities who have less access to necessary documents and less and fewer resources to secure an ID. Since this access to a driver's license for all people continues to be important, Minnesota should track and study the extent to which disparate impacts are being created and act to avert those impacts whenever possible. With that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Feist. We've got next Mr. Keller, and perhaps we have following him Mr. Henry Jimenez and Katie Avina. Perhaps they could approach the table. Mr. Keller.
Mr. Chair, my name is John Keller. I'm the Director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. We are the state's largest provider of legal services to immigrants and refugees, and we serve statewide with 5 offices. We primarily work in the area of federal immigration law, so we work on cases ranging from naturalization to young dreamers who've obtained status through the executive order. I'm here today to testify about the importance of having access to driver's licenses for people who are undocumented. I appreciate the important work that Senator Pratt has undertaken by introducing legislation that has both Real ID compliant licenses and those that do not need to comply with Real ID. We've had positive conversations with the Senator. I look forward to continuing to work with the Senator and others to address both of these concerns. It is our hope that Real ID can be passed without taking any steps backwards to the current law and the current rules as they stand. The last point, and part of this I apologized in private to Senator Pratt, a concern that has materialized with the most recent executive orders that have been issued by the President on January 25th would allow for local law enforcement across the state, whether it's state patrol, city police chiefs, or county sheriffs, to enforce immigration law. This is referred to as the 287G section of the Immigration and Naturalization Act. It was a provision that was suspended under the Obama administration and is now being revisited under the most recent executive order. We have significant concern about untrained local law enforcement exercising immigration enforcement and the precarious situation that puts people who do not have access to driving privileges. It raises the need once again for public safety purposes to have a debate with both parties on a standalone driver's license bill. With that, I'll conclude my testimony and stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mayor, very much, Mr. Keller. I see that Mr. Jimenez is not at the table, so we've apparently got a substitute. Would you identify yourself and please proceed?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I apologize for Henry not being here. He had to do other, or cover the council with other issues. My name is Uriel Perez Espinosa, U-R-I-E-L, Perez, P-E-R-E-Z, Espinosa, E-S-P-I-N-O-Z-A, for the record. I'm the board chair of the Minnesota Council on Latino Affairs. While our council understands the need for the implementation of the Real ID in Minnesota, however, we are concerned with the burden that unnecessary language in this bill will have on 35 to 50,000 Minnesota Latinos, not only undocumented, but those who have lawful permanent status and temporary lawful status. Its language we have found to be unnecessary in order for Minnesota to comply with the Real ID Act. According to the Department of Homeland Security, quote unquote, Real ID allows compliant states to issue driver licenses and identification cards where the identity of the applicant cannot be assured or for whom lawful presence is not determined. Currently, there are 270,000 Latinos living in Minnesota. Many are members of the households with mixed immigration status. The inability for undocumented immigrants to participate due to lack of identification deeply affects Minnesota families and our beloved communities. Other states in our nation have fully complied with the Real ID Act without including language specifying legal status in their non-compliant form of identification. Our council advice to this committee is to consider doing the same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Espinoza.
Mr. Chair,
Senator,
if I could just correct the testifier.
well, before you say, if I could maybe have the next folks come up. I've got Katie Avina, Lars Nigsted, and Vic Rosenthal. Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To the testifier, that language that is in the House bill is not in this bill. We here in the Senate have agreed, I think on a bipartisan basis, that the issue of creating a real ID and whether or not undocumented immigrants should have driver's license are two separate issues that require, that should not be merged in this bill, and that's the intent. So to the testifier, there's nothing that will change statutorily with the non-compliant ID.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. We've got two testifiers up. Neither would appear to be Katie Avina. So please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Lars Snegstad. I'm the policy director for Isaiah. Isaiah is a statewide organization of clergy, congregations, and people of faith working for racial and economic justice. I've attempted to sit down with Senator Pratt over the last couple of weeks and had not been able to get on his schedule, and just became aware of this amendment very recently, but wanted to express our concern. First of all, I heard the concern expressed earlier today about people are afraid to book an airline ticket next year. With all due respect, people are afraid and legitimately terrified in our communities. In many of your communities across the state, including Morris and Shakopee and Chaska, families are afraid that because of a traffic stop, they will be torn apart through deportation. Here's the story of how that came to be. It used to be you didn't have to show your lawful status to get a driver's license. It had nothing to do with each other. There's 12 states and the District of Columbia that don't have any prohibition for undocumented immigrants to achieve driver's licenses. That makes sense for business reasons, public safety reasons, for moral reasons. That changed in Minnesota.
Mr. Nick said, to the bill.
To the bill.
This is
Yep.
not
No,
bill.
exactly. So this changed.
Excuse me, Mr. Nick.
Yes, sir.
This is not a bill regarding driver's licenses for folks who are here illegally. This is a bill that has to do with real ID. So if you would address your comments to the bill that is in front of us, please.
Mr. Chair.
Senator Dibble.
I think there is an argument that there is language that has implications for driver's license status, and I think we should allow the testimony. There is language. There's this new language in Section 24 that people are concerned about, and I think that's what they're trying to speak to. Additionally, there's language in Section 4, and so...
And Senator Dibble, if that is in fact what Mr. Nagstead wants to talk about, I'm simply inviting him to do so. Mr. Nagstead.
It is, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will cut to the point. So the rules changed through administrative rulemaking, through expedited rulemaking. We appreciate that there is no statutory change made in this bill. However, it would, we feel, close the door on further administrative rulemaking change, and we feel that that's unfair to the immigrant communities in our state. What it does is it practically presents no path for immigrants to achieve driver's license except through legislative action, when in the past that has been achieved through administrative rulemaking. So our concerns are with Section 24, the rulemaking section, and whether that unnecessarily closes the door on immigrant families and businesses who employ immigrants, and public safety and law enforcement and all the other communities who have testified in support of that issue. We do think the legislature should pass a clean Real ID bill that does not address this issue. We think that's possible. 8 other states have done so, including Nevada, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Vermont, Connecticut, Maryland, and Delaware. So we thank you for your attention to this issue. Look forward to working further with Senator Pratt on this, and I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Nagstead. Mr. Rosenthal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for the opportunity to testify. My name is Vic Rosenthal. I'm the Executive Director of Jewish Community Action, an organization that's been around for 21 years working on social, racial, and economic justice issues. Trying to be following your instructions, I've worked on the issue of driver's licenses in this state now for about 18 to 20 years. And this is not the first debate we've had. We debated Real ID many years ago and decided not to move forward with it as a state. And as the prior testimony offered, we changed our driver's license rules back in the early part of the last decade in the belief that we had a problem with our state in terms of who was getting driver's licenses. I believe that the notion in this bill that says that we can't use rulemaking as a way to explore different ways of providing access for driver's licenses to undocumented people is in fact a very serious point. Now, while I appreciate Senator Pratt's efforts to get the Real ID bill done, and also appreciate the idea that we want to make it possible for people to fly with the right kind of documentation, I think that's hardly the biggest problem confronting our state right now. It seems to me that if we allowed rulemaking to change driver's licenses and who had access to obtain them back in 2003, the least we can do at this point is keep that door open. I had really hoped and have watched the Senate debate this issue for the last few years and really thought that this was going to be the year that we would finally get this done. Pass a clean Real ID bill that would enable us to deal with people getting onto airplanes, but at the same time provide an opportunity through the non-compliant license to let people that are undocumented finally, by way of rules or through legislation, get their driver's licenses as well. This is not only an issue that has to do with just keeping families together, giving people the chance to drive legally, get auto insurance, but this is an issue that law enforcement has consistently talked about as a way to be able to protect public safety in this state. It seems to me that the Senate has a chance, both as a Senate and as a message back to the House, that we can pass a clean Real ID bill with no language in it about rulemaking for the future regarding people with lawful status, and enable both the legislature but also the Department of Public Safety to look at other ways to enable undocumented people to finally get access to driver's licenses in this state, as we did for many, many years without any problem in this state at all. So I hope the Senate will take this direction. I'm more than happy to work with Senator Pratt to try to talk about how we did this before and how we can do it again. But let's make sure we pass a clean Real ID bill and send that bill to the governor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rosenthal. The next. Please. I have two testifiers left, a Becky Flory and a Madeline Lohman.
Mr. Chair, if I could just make a quick comment. The intent in the direction of this bill is, in fact, to send a clean bill to the governor, to not mix the immigration and the issuance of Real ID together. And simply, it's been a practice, in fact, a rather common practice in many of the committees, to limit rulemaking for any of the departments to the subject of the bill. This doesn't change Chapter 14 rulemaking in any way, and adds no additional statutory implementation. Any senator can bring a bill that would do exactly what the testifier asked. In fact, we had a bill from Senator Champion back in the 2013-14 legislative session that would have done exactly that. It passed off the Senate floor. The concern being that there were a number of statutory changes that Senator Champion and I worked through that simply going through the rulemaking process would have made it difficult to implement it without the legislature's involvement. And so, again, the intent, Mr. Chair, is to send the governor a clean bill, and I think we have a different perspective of opinion on what that clean bill might, what the definition of a clean bill is.
Thank you, Mr. Pratt. Ms. Flory?
Mr. Chair and
Please
committee.
proceed.
Thank you. I am a Quaker, and we have a phrase, the last speaker spoke my mind. And so he did speak very eloquently to something that I care very much about. I do advocate for a clean bill, and I listen to you, Senator Pratt, and I confess that my sophistication in law is not there to understand the technicalities of what's before me, but my sentiment is I have been involved with the immigrant community my entire life in Minnesota, 40-some years. And so I'm going to read this one sentence, which is, I am for a clean bill, but my concern is that we are very careful in our language, in any amendments, that we not prohibit a license for any Minnesota resident, and that we leave paths open to continue for everyone to fulfill, well, what I call human rights. So I think about the daily lives of people, and that's the message that I've brought to you. So it's with heartfelt conviction that clean bill, real ID, I could support, but I'm very careful about any language that might prohibit any forward movement we have, and I want to advance to fulfill the human rights that are embedded in the country, in our United States.
Thank you, Ms. Flory. Mrs. Lohman, please state your name for the record and then just proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Madeline Lohman, and I am a senior researcher at the Advocates for Human Rights. And I want to thank Senator Pratt for clarifying the Section 24 on rulemaking. And I just would encourage you to ensure that going forward it keeps that neutral posture that does not prohibit future regulatory changes on issuing driver's licenses. We have concerns for our clients who are asylum seekers. They have permission to stay in the United States while their case is being heard, and that process can take many years. We've had clients who have been waiting 9 years to have their case heard. So during that time, they are allowed to stay in the United States to work, to drive, but the process for them getting driver's licenses right now is very complicated because though they have this indefinite permission to stay, while their case is being heard, they're required to produce a work permit on an annual basis to receive a driver's license because they need to show something with an end date. The work permits are not routinely issued on time. So often what happens is the client receives a letter saying your work permit is about to expire, your license is about to expire, you need to renew. They have already tried to renew their work permit, and they're now waiting the many months that it takes to get this renewed work permit. In that time, their license expires. They can't drive legally anymore. They may lose their job because they can't get to it. And in fact, one of our clients got a misdemeanor because they were forced to drive in this interim period where they could not get a license. So the fact that we are not allowed to amend the rules to help many, many different kinds of immigrants in Minnesota is a problem. And so I encourage you to make sure that the bill does not foreclose those kinds of changes going forward. And I thank Senator Pratt for his concern in that direction.
Thank you, Ms. Lohman. Okay, we have reached the end, members of the folks who wanted to testify, both for and against the bill. And we can now go to member questions. State government has to be in this room at 1 o'clock. We can go up to kind of close to that 1 o'clock mark. But I will tell you, if we are not completed, then we will come back this afternoon at 4:30 and complete our work. So I'm just giving you that heads up, members, so that, number one, you know you might be back here at 4:30 this afternoon, and I don't want to limit your questions. So with that, the first senator I have on is Senator Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just want to say thank you to Senator Pratt for the hard work he's done, and I appreciated the testifiers, particularly Mr. Killian, with the get her done attitude, and I think it's time to get her done. Thank you.
Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to dive right into it here.
I'm sorry, Senator Dibble, I got distracted.
Oh, quite all right.
Could you start over?
Sure. Yeah. So I don't want to quash other questions on other parts of the bill, but I'm sensitive to the time. Did want to jump in and talk a little bit about Section 24. I would like to offer the A8 amendment in order to facilitate or further that discussion, if that could be distributed.
The amendment will be distributed, Senator Dibble.
I'll describe it as it's coming around, Mr. Chair.
Senator Dibble.
The A8 would deliver a thoroughly clean bill. It would clean the bill slightly, a little bit more, just by eliminating what I think is superfluous and unnecessary language. It would delete the language on line 22.3 that reads only to the extent necessary, and then also delete the language technical aspects of the. So it would read, it would give the commissioner direction to adopt rules that are confined to this purpose without those qualifying statements. And then it seems like lines 22.10 to 22.12 kind of double down on that, those guardrails in saying this grant of rulemaking does not authorize the commissioner, et cetera. Those things wouldn't occur in any case because it's a specific grant of rules for the purpose of adopting the Real ID Act. So the effect of having this language, and I very, very much appreciate Senator Pratt's intent as articulated during his testimony here today and his hard work. I think I understand what he's trying to achieve, and I certainly don't envy him his role. I played the role of the chief author last year myself. But what I'm trying to accomplish is to be literally silent on this subject that was testified to by those who would be advocating on behalf of our immigrant community, so as to not send a signal or indicate legislative intent to warn off the executive branch or the agency from even considering some changes in this arena. And I think despite Senator Pratt's intention, that's how this would be interpreted. Now, we already know that the agency thinks they need actually an affirmative statement from the legislature of some sort, if not an outright driver's license for all legislation before they would proceed. I think there's a difference of opinion on that. I think the idea that using Real ID as a vehicle to achieve those ends is not implied by my offering this amendment, but I'll make no secret of it. I think that that would be granting driver's license to those who don't have legal presence in the state is a very good idea for a lot of good reasons that have already been well articulated by our testifiers. I'll just add, for my own 2 cents worth on that subject, Mr. Chair, I was at a press conference this morning, standing up to call attention to incidents of domestic violence and women who have lost their life from intimate partner violence. And the subject came up about people being fearful of calling in their own police in those circumstances, fearful of calling in the protection and safety from the police in their own community because of the circumstance of being marginalized, because they're kept out of accessing legal documents like driver's license, and so the police are not looked to as protectors, but as a threat. And that has only gone up by a matter of untold degrees this last weekend by the actions of our president. So I think in light of what has gone on over this past weekend, the way our immigrant community is feeling, what this language infers, whether Senator Pratt intends or not, it would be advisable to clean this language out and pass a genuinely clean bill.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I appreciate Senator Dibble's thoughts and understand, I would oppose the A8 and A13 amendments or I'm sorry, just the A8 amendment, I guess, is what's in front of us. Mr. Chair, there's no secret that there's a stark difference between this bill and the House version. And what we've worked on here in the Senate is to make sure that the department and the public, quite frankly, know that we are not mixing the two issues. And this grants expedited rulemaking in order to do the implementation of Real ID, but makes no changes to Chapter 14, which is the general rulemaking section. So I would have to, disagree with Senator Dibble that we're putting any new restrictions on the department. I think we're just clarifying the intent of the Senate to keep these two issues separate.
Any other discussion on the A8 amendment? Senator Carlson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Senator Pratt, do you have a sense as to what the governor's position is on taking away that rulemaking authority, and also will he sign it without it in it?
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Carlson. I have tried to reach out to the governor's office. I need to try again. I have not talked specifically about this section with them. However, I would say, again, this does not take any rulemaking authority away from the governor or the department. It clarifies the scope of the expedited rulemaking necessary to implement a Real ID.
Any other discussion regarding the A8 amendment? I would indicate to Senator Dibble that while I agree with you on some of what you had indicated regarding the driver's license, I will oppose the A8 amendment for a different reason than Senator Pratt. And that is, I generally speaking, and have been very consistent in opposing what I call general rulemaking authority. And with the A8 amendment, we would be moving in that direction. I am much more comfortable with rulemaking authority that specifies certain criteria that the government must follow. And I really do not like or support the notion of general rulemaking where, at least in my mind, we essentially abandon our legislative responsibility to pass bills and give it over to a state agency who then enacts rules. So that's just my 2 cents worth. Senator Dibble.
Mr. Chair, I'll just read the sentence as it would, if the amendment were to prevail. It would read, the Commissioner of Public Safety must adopt rules and amend existing Minnesota rules to implement the tiered license program required by this act to issue the Real ID Act and driver's license and Minnesota ID cards that are not acceptable for federal identification. So I don't think this opens the door, and I think it to general rulemaking. It's specific to the purposes of this bill, but doesn't go one step further and infer what I think would be interpreted by the agency as a intent of the legislature, even if they were to engage in some unrelated rulemaking effort, or would be so inclined to amend the rules that already exist on the books that prevent driver's license for those who don't have lawful presence in the state. So we wouldn't be codifying those rules in the classic sense, but we certainly would be giving an indication of the legislature's posture on that subject. So taking us one step away from ultimately achieving what is, admittedly a goal of mine in the long term. So I think this goes just 1 or 2 steps too far to achieve exactly what Senator Pratt articulates he wants, which is a clean bill that's unrelated to that subject. I think this ties that subject to this bill.
And thank you, Senator Dibble. I guess I would just have to respectfully disagree. I find great comfort in the language that is being proposed to be struck in the A8 amendment, namely only to the extent necessary, and we're talking about technical aspects of the two-tiered system. I like that language because it is more, more specifically ties the hands of the state agencies in terms of what kind of rules can be adopted. So that's my thoughts on the issue. Unless there's any other discussion, we will proceed to vote on the A8 amendment. All those in favor of the A8 amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. The A8 amendment is not adopted.
Mr. Chair, may I have a division?
Division has been called. All those in favor of the A8 amendment, please raise your hands. You can put your hands down. All those opposed to the A8 amendment, raise your hands, please. On division, there were 5 in favor, 8 opposed. The amendment is not adopted. Further discussion on the A5 amendment. Senator Hall, I'll go to Senator Hall at this point. Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Has our staff come up with anything for an amendment on, where am I at, section 21 that we had discussed earlier? Are we looking at sending that off to judicial?
To answer your question, I don't know yet, Senator
Okay.
Hall. Perhaps when I recognize Senator Dibble, we'll find out.
No. Actually.
Okay.
Senator Dibble?
Mr. Chair, actually, I was going to ask Senator Pratt about Section 6 on line 4, on page 4, lines 4.10 to 4.15. I don't understand this this section or its purpose or its implications. If it's confined to just real ID, if that's the case, it's probably fine. So I just was trying to understand if subdivision 5 there applies only to real ID compliant driver's license or ID cards.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Senator Dibble. The idea here is that whether, and I'll ask Ms. Stengel to correct me if I misstate it, whether or not you are, if you're here with legal status and you have the status check dates on your current driver's license, if you are within 30 days of expiration of that status check date and you don't have an updated green card, you would be precluded from getting a driver's license. And I believe that extends beyond, because we're talking about Section 171, I think that goes to both compliant and non-compliant licenses.
Senator Dibble?
Ms. Stengel, does that comport with your understanding?
Ms. Stengel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Senator Dibble and Senator Pratt. So there is a cross-reference on line 4.14, as Senator Pratt mentioned, that takes us to 17106 subdivision 3. And if you care to read that language, it starts on line 6.24 of this bill. Specifically, paragraph B starts on line 7.20 of this bill. So it does apply to all of the applications. However, the only reference to any sort of lawful admission appears further down in that bill by the amendment we adopted earlier, and that lawful presence language only appears for the real ID language. So by that cross-reference, it would appear to me that that only applies to the real ID compliant.
Thank you for the clarification.
Okay.
Senator Pratt?
I stand corrected based on council's advice.
All right. Anything further, Senator Dibble?
No, thank you. I was going to move to take it out if it did apply to more than just real ID licenses, real ID compliant licenses, but seems to be a matter of record that it only refers to Real ID compliant licenses, so I'll let it rest.
Senator Friends, did you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did, but I think it was answered in the discussion of the A8 amendment, and I would add my thanks to Senator Pratt for the work on the bill.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Senator Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if it was in our packets, a submission by Mr. Jim Harper to the Minnesota Senate Transportation, Finance, and Policy Committee. It talks about there that he's a former member of the Cato Institute who has just left there, but he has been following the Real ID for many years and basically says that this is a unconstitutional grab of our state, any state's ability to be able to have any effect on being able to, on licensing and the opportunity to have have any more input into our state licensing program. And basically he says it's a threat that has been proven many times in Supreme Court that this is unconstitutional, and even though they hang it over us, it's basically an ongoing deal by the federal employees, federal government, to get us to comply to that. And when I see this here, I'm concerned, and I guess I am very much troubled by the fact that we are going to be giving up our authority, whether it's in transportation or judiciary or wherever, because it was mentioned. The other thing I'm concerned about is the fact that this packet that was handed out shows that the awarded grants that were given to the Department Driver's License Security Grant Program that was given to our Department of Vehicle Services, that were, even though testimony was given that there was no recollection of a grant being accepted or being put in, according to this document here, it shows that, that there were grants made to the Department of Vehicle Services and Public Safety for some monies to our state, and it was after the May 13th, 2009, according to this non-compliance with Real ID Act was put in place. I don't think we've repealed that yet. I think it's still in place. So it looks like our own bureaucracy has gone against what we have in statute as far as the law. It looks like it's a broken law. And so my concern is that we're going in a direction that we've got a bureaucracy that's not listening to what statute has to say, and then we're being kowtowed or dragged into here by the federal government. I would like to just mention that because of my concern for this, I would like to have a roll call on the vote.
Senator Anderson, when we get to the vote, the roll call is granted.
Thank you.
Is there any further discussion on the A5 amendment? Oh, I'm sorry, Senator Kent.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is such an important issue, and I've worked really hard on it myself over the past few years, and I very much appreciate that Senator Pratt has as well. I also very much appreciate that his intent is to offer a clean bill, and he has been welcoming to those discussions. I am afraid with the A8 amendment, I would have been able to vote for this bill, but at this point, I have too many concerns that the language that is included in this bill in Section 24 will take us backwards. And so, therefore, to me, that does not mean a clean bill. And I appreciate those efforts. I hope we can continue to work on it, but I'm not able to support it in this form at this time.
Senator Dibble.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, maybe I misunderstood. Was our intent to try to consider some language to Section 21, the firearms matter today, or was that at a future stop?
Senator, I'll answer the question this way, Senator Dibble. We're going to entertain any amendments that come forward, and with discussion. At this point, I don't see an amendment.
Okay.
And unless there is, I am assuming very shortly we're going to have a motion to move this bill forward. It will go from here. If it passes out of this committee, it will go to judiciary. I don't know if that answers your question, but I do not have any more amendments that I'm aware of.
So Mr. Chair, I would move to delete Section 21.
Senator Dibble, what page is that on?
On page 19.
Senator Pratt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly, Ms. Engel and I have been talking about this issue since it came up prior to, or following her testimony. And we've been trying to find a way to protect both public safety and individual Second Amendment rights. At this point in time, I would oppose the amendment and give us time to work on it and present it to the Judiciary Committee and try to find a more nuanced solution that meets both our law enforcement, public safety needs while protecting Second Amendment rights. And I would just simply ask Ms. Engel if she has any comments on it.
Ms. Engler.
Mr. Chair, members, the Bureau is happy to work with Senator Pratt and anyone else on the issue with respect to access to firearms data, and both protecting privacy and working for our law enforcement community.
Senator Senjum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Senator Pratt, does it make a great deal of difference to you if it leaves this committee without this section in it? And obviously, I would understand it, frankly, even expect that you would amend the bill then in Judiciary to include a new revised appropriate section 24 or whatever it is. There may be some people around the table that just feel more comfortable voting for this bill with that section deleted. So just my question.
Senator Pratt.
Senator Senjum or Mr. Chair and Senator Senjum, I believe that it would have an impact on the fiscal note as well. And I would prefer to leave it as is and continue to refine it rather than strike it. I think we want to send the public the message that we do in fact care about their privacy as well as their public safety.
Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being on the Judiciary Committee, I can commit that we will be looking at that, and we will make some changes in conjunction with the senator in the department.
Senator Dibble.
So, well, Mr. Chair, we're giving speeches that are laden with code words and values and the like. So I'll just point out that sending this bill out of here with Section 21 in it, we know from direct testimony from the agency, this is language that puts our police officers' lives in danger. This is not a good idea. It can be taken out, and better language can be inserted at some future point in time. So I renew my motion to delete Section 21.
Thank you, Senator Dibble. Senator Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this section of the bill under the jurisdiction of transportation?
It is, Senator Hall.
Okay.
It's also, Senator Hall, specifically under the jurisdiction of the judiciary. Is there any further discussion on the A5 amendment? Hearing none.
Mr. Chair, I have a motion.
My apologies. It's the Dibble oral amendment. Senator Dibble has orally moved to delete Section 21 of the bill for any of those senators who were not in the room and at the table. Senator Pratt has opposed that oral motion. I don't think there's any further discussion. All those in favor of the oral amendment to delete Section 21, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is not adopted.
Mr. Chair, may I have a division?
Division has been called. All those in favor of the amendment to delete Section 21, please raise your hands. Those opposed, please raise your hand. There being 6 ayes and 8 noes, the amendment is not adopted. Any further discussion on the A5 amendment? If not, we're going to proceed to vote. A roll call has been requested and granted. Mr. Nelson will take the roll.
Newman?
Yes.
Newman, yes. Anderson?
No.
Anderson, no. Carlson? No. Carlson, no. Dibble? No. Dibble, no. Franzen? Franzen? Friends?
No.
Friends, no. Hall?
Yes.
Hall, yes. Jazinski?
Yes.
Jazinski, yes. Jensen?
Yes.
Jensen, yes. Kent?
No.
Kent, no. Kiffmeyer?
Yes.
Kiffmeyer, yes. Little?
Yes.
Little, yes. Osmic?
Yes.
Osmic, yes. Senjum?
Yes.
Senjum, yes. Westrom?
Yes.
Westrom, yes.
Members, Senator Westrom, if you'd wait, members, we did not move the bill, so we're going to do the exercise again. Where's? One moment. Senator Jazinski.
Mr. Chair, I move that Senate File Number 166 be recommended to pass as amended and referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
Your assistant will take the roll.
Newman?
Yes.
Newman, yes. Anderson? Anderson, no. Carlson?
No.
Carlson, no. Dibble?
No.
Dibble, no. Franzen? Franzen? Frentz?
No.
Frentz, no. Hall?
Yes.
Hall, yes. Jazinski?
Yes.
Jazinski, yes. Jensen?
Yes.
Jensen, yes. Kent?
No.
Kent, no. Kiffmeyer?
Yes.
Kiffmeyer, yes. Little?
Yes.
Little, yes. Osmic?
Yes.
Osmic, yes. Senjum? Senjum, yes. Westrom? Westrom, yes.
There being 9 yes votes and 5 no votes, the motion passes and the amendment is adopted. Senator Pratt, you are on your way to judiciary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, committee. Hopefully, if things go well, we'll see this bill again on the floor and in finance as well. So again, I want to thank the committee for their time and for their extra time in order to consider this. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. We are adjourned.